This is really, really surreal for me, actually, to think in 2025 I would be sitting here talking about my love for tape at an event. It's just such a surreal. It's wonderful. When Tim came to the studio to talk to me about speaking, it was, without question. I said I've got to be here and talk because it's a subject that it's probably the most passionate about in my life, actually. Analog recording is where my heart is. I wanted to keep it today super informal and maybe more conceptual. I do have some sessions and some Pro Tool stuff, and I've got some, bounces, and I can talk about my workflow, and I'd love to be open and, open up the room if anyone had any specific questions about things as well, I know I've got about half an hour. But I guess without further ado, I'll maybe just introduce myself, give you a bit of context about how I got to where I am now. So I am Miles Clinton James. I have a beautiful family, 2 young children, and a beautiful wife called Fiznara. We're based in North London, in the Haringey area, and I'm a Londoner, born and bred. So I grew up in the city, and it's very much part of my makeup, my fabric of my makeup. I had quite a formal music upbringing, I would say. My dad introduced me to music through his record collection. So he was a DJ, and he, our house back in the day, I'm not sure if it would happen so much these days, but our house was kind of an open house. So in Finsbury Park, we used to just kind of have the door open. We'd have neighbours. We knew everyone on the road, so people would just come in, and there was loads of parties. And I'm one of 6, so the house was always full of life and stuff happening. Some stuff good stuff, some stuff bad stuff. But it was a vibrant, interesting upbringing in Finsbury Park. But one of the earliest memories I have was of these house parties where my dad used to play, until 2, 3 later in the morning, reggae records, soul records, Afrobeat records, a lot of jazz records. So it was kind of like the foundation of my musical upbringing was being made during those years. In fact, Miles is after Miles Davis, so my dad was like, we're going to call him Miles after Miles Davis. And my surname, Clinton, is actually after George Clinton of Parliament Funkadelic, so it's Miles Clinton. So it's kind of like, didn't really have much of a choice, at that age. Early days. I was about 5 or 6 when I started learning guitar. And my dad I don't know why I took to it. My dad went to Holloway Market and bought, a cheap £50 nylon guitar, and I just took to it. I just loved it. And at that time it was Oasis and bands that had, chords to play. And I was I was inseparable at that age. I just couldn't stop wanting to learn what the latest Oasis tune was, and had all the albums, and that kind of led me in school. I started to play in the assemblies, so I had we'd all get round, and before you knew it, I was leading these assemblies in primary school, which was quite funny. So you've got the kids that are my age sitting there, and I'm sitting there kind of leading and singing on guitar, just felt like music was everything from quite young. My goal would have been to be, a professional musician. So that continued through school, through secondary school. I had a specialist music scheme where they gave me free music lessons, and I learned saxophone and flute along with guitar. And met amazing musicians. I was just surrounded by really talented people. Some people who are in the industry now, and Dave Akumu went to the same school, Pimlico, and Kareem Dayes, who's Yussef Dayes' brother, was my closest mate at school. So that's kind of how the Yussef Dayes connection came around. They were family, from young. And loads of other people, actually. It's so nice to think back now that, we're all still working in the industry and, doing cool stuff. Continued that journey through to university, and I got a scholarship to Royal Academy of Music, where I did a jazz degree. So this is the stage I'm still thinking about being the best jazz guitarist, or being the best musician and wanting to be playing around the world. I also got a provisional place at a school called Juilliard in New York, which is a very formal, it's like a really proper. So what happened was, on my 3rd year, I joined Academy because they promised me on my 3rd year I'd be able to have a year in New York at Juilliard School, as part of their affiliate program. But came to the 3rd year, and the head of the uni had disappeared, and I was kind of left going, I want to be in New York. I feel New York is the place where, the best musicians are, specifically in that jazz scene. That was the feeling I was getting at that time. So I dropped out my degree, and I went to New York for about 6 months or so. I've got family in New York, so I went out there. And it was at that time I kind of realised formal, the studying and wanting to be this, the genre, the best at that kind of thing wasn't for me. I felt like my tastes were way more eclectic, and not just, I was really interested in zooming out and actually thinking about the whole sound of music combined, bands. Found myself buying more drums and buying more synthesizers than I was guitar, at that stage. So yeah, that was a long time ago. And then I joined a guy called Michael Kiwanuka's band at the start of his career. So me and Mike grew up. Mike's also from North London. He's an incredible British Ugandan soul folk singer, and has been making incredible records for the longest time. But at that stage, we knew Mike as a session guitarist, a bit like me, and I joined his band thinking I'm going to be playing jazz or whatever. But actually, when I met him, he was singing these very simple, pure, kind of honest folk songs. And I was like, wow, Mike, I didn't even know you could sing. And we locked in, and I stayed touring with Mike for the first album, second album. So a good 6 years of my life I spent on the road touring, going around the world and doing that thing, which was an amazing experience, as you can imagine, in your 20s, to be meeting, doing Conan O'Brien TV show and Letterman show and all this kind of stuff, and thinking, wow, this is what it feels like to be a rock musician or soul musician, whatever it was. And that was amazing, and I learnt so much, and I actually really started to understand during that process how music made in the studio translates or doesn't translate in the live arena. It was such a valuable experience, actually, being able to watch audience respond to certain songs and certain emotions, or not respond and going, oh my God, that was my favourite part of, when we were rehearsing, and then finding out actually it just, so super, super valuable experience, which, feeds more than maybe I give it credit into my production kind of, knowledge now at the moment. Came to a stage when I wanted to settle down. I had a long-term girlfriend who's now my wife, fortunately, and touring and family life doesn't work. She's not in music, and she was not interested in entertaining. How exciting, I might have been on stage with, we did a support tour for Mumford & Sons at one stage, and it was 40,000 people, and it was all, it was like, had on-site chefs and all this kind of stuff, and I'd come home and she'd just put me straight in my place and be like, well, I don't care about any of that, So she really, really kind of balanced me, and it made me realise, actually, if I want to make a kind of real concrete, setup in London, I'm going to have to finish touring. So I quit with Mike and sold my guitar to buy an engagement ring. And, my vintage Strat, that is a sign of commitment, Oh, someone's got it, but I had to do it, man. I had to do it. It was the right thing to do. So we came back and we got married, and we've been living in North London. We've been based in Haringey since 2019, but, she's a Londoner as well. When I finished touring, I thought, flipping heck, how am I going to now make a living in London? I'm based here. I want to make a home. How is this going to work? And the natural move that I feel a lot of musicians have been doing and have trying to do is go, okay, well, maybe we should start producing. If we're not teaching, we're thinking about production, and we're thinking about alternative ways. Maybe I'll start up a studio. Maybe I'll become a session musician. So I did a lot of session work, which was good work and good records and stuff. But I knew that actually going in and just lending my guitar for a couple of hours and getting a paycheck didn't leave me feeling particularly fulfilled. And I always had these feelings when I go into the studio, you're not really letting me, I just wanted to get my hands on the controls and start going, actually, this could sound like this, or this could sound like that. So I, made a decision that I was going to pivot into production. And, that was, pre kind of COVID time. So my actual professional production career hasn't been ages and ages. But my love for the sound of records has been since young, and my understanding of the relationships between musicians and producers from seeing stuff from different angles really helped feed into the space I'm in now, as a producer. Yeah, so that's like a little bit of background. I guess a side background to that is whilst I was touring and doing that experience, I was buying loads of equipment, like loads. I would be spending, so I'd be maybe getting my daily fee, saving it for 4 days and then going and buying a mini Moog synthesizer or something like that. It was just like, at that stage, the pound to the dollar was great. It was over $2 to the pound, and I was like, man. So the band probably hated me because I just load loads of gear in the back of the tour bus. I'm not the main guy. I'm just the guitarist. But I can't buy another drum kit. And then the other band started seeing, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. So they started buying bits as well before you knew it. So yeah, that's kind of what got me into a space now where I've got a kind of fully analog. I've got a laptop over there, and I've got a couple of other bits, but it's primarily gear from late 60s, 70s, early 80s, and stuff that I, at the time, just would listen to a record and go, what's that sound? And, there would have already been plug-in stuff there, but it just wouldn't give me that feeling. And then I'd buy the bit of equipment and go, oh, I see. Right, shit, okay, what next? Have a look. And that experience just kept happening at that age. I kept hearing stuff and going, I really think that's really interesting. How do I go about and get a look online, spend all my money, buy the bit of equipment and go, oh, yeah, that's that, right, flip. And then it would happen again, And here we are now where I've got stuff gear in my studio, gear in the loading bay, gear at my grand's. Rest in peace, my recently passed grand's garage, which I've got to clear out. I'm not a hoarder. I'm not a hoarder, but it's all informed purchases. It's just I've got the issue with selling stuff, which is where we are. So so then pivoted into production and started. My experience as a musician in London meant that I was well connected with musicians and on the ground and with artists and stuff, and I was always quite respected as a jazz or soul guitarist or whatever. So I'd get a lot of calls, and I was finding more and more I was getting called into studios, and I was like, okay, there must be something that I know about the way instruments are played on records, or the kind of the thing that seems to be standing with producers, And the more I did that, the more work kind of started leaning me towards the studio. Early days, I worked a lot with a producer who, an incredible producer called Inflow, who I was brought in to record on early Cleo Soul and early Simz stuff. So my history with Little Simz actually goes back years and years, 2015 or so. And it was through some of those connections that I really realised actually I want to be making records full time. So I'm based in North London. I have a analog-based studio. I've got some photos which I'll show you. It's based around a 70s MCI console, which is a brand that, it's been around since the late 60s, but in America, it was the first kind of console that, tell me if I'm getting too technical as well, because I can just go off on a technical tangent. It's the first console that was maybe, I would say, probably affordable. It was probably like half the price of some of the other big boards, the APIs and the Neve consoles and stuff. And at that stage, only a couple of years back when I bought it, it was the only board that I could really afford to buy, but still felt it had some sound, had a vibe. So that's the centerpiece of my studio.
What model?
What model? It's MCI 528. And to my surprise, actually, there's a tech in the room right now who helped me restore it, which is incredible. So happy to see him, Pete, somewhere, wherever he is. There he is, Pete's there. So Pete helped me painstakingly kind of bring this board back to life. I bought it, cosmetically looked great, and then this is cosmetically looked great. Got a really good deal. Inside was an absolute, shit show, basically. And I'd left Kiwanuka's band at this stage. It was in Spain. And I paid the bass player, he went up, paid the guy, they put it on the tour bus for me, so I was still inflicting, damage on the band even years after me leaving, They actually put it all the way up to North France and I went and collected it. That's the centre, the control system of my setup upstairs. And then around that, I have a heap of tape machines. And I'll maybe go a bit in on why tape happened for me and what it means to me, So I previously had a studio in Finchley Road, a good couple of years ago, and there was someone locally selling this MCI tape machine for £700 or something back then, and I didn't have a clue about tape. I just saw, I wasn't obsessed with tape at that stage as I am now, basically. I took a punt and bought it, and I got it back, and it was huge. I had to hire a van, and I think I was in Golders Green car park, and I hit, the first time driving a van, and I hit a car on the way back, and I was like, this day is so stressful, this machine, I need 3 people. Anyway, I got it back, and I was super excited, thinking that I could just press play, and I'd be hearing all the stuff of my dreams. I was hoping it would be a time machine, basically. And I pressed play, and this is whatever reel was on there at the time, and it started very slowly, and then I heard Mustang Sally. I was like, oh, that's an interesting take on it. I didn't know at the time that tape, a lot of tapes from back in the day shed, and get sticky after years. So a lot of the most popular formulations of tape from the 70s up until maybe the early 90s have some real issues with, they go sticky after a while. I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea, but this tape was incredibly sticky. So then I think after that I thought, well, I put on a new tape, and I hadn't cleaned the heads, and the tape wasn't moving. It was a real kind of newbie, rookie approach to tape. It wasn't that I had someone over, putting their arm around and go, come on, mate, you don't know what you're doing. It was just plug in and find out, And actually at that time, I was in my early 20s, no one else was really, no one of my age, I should say, was really messing around with tape, or even, I wasn't aware when I looked left and right that people were already involved. It's definitely nowhere near where we are now, which is incredible. Back then, I didn't have, I had the internet, so I'd find little bits of. Moving forward a bit with this MCI journey, because this first tape machine is really what started my passion for analog recording, So it sat there. I didn't know what to do. Techs were £300 at that time, in your early 20s. I didn't have the money for that, so I just sat there for ages. And then I heard that there was this guy in Nashville called Steve Sadler, who has unfortunately passed away now. And he offers a Skype subscription service for $200, And I thought, that sounds reasonable. $200 for a year, this guy's going to help me out. So I paid the $200, and Steve comes on the screen, and here's this kind of, you can't imagine, rest in peace, Steve, but this kind of huge Nashville, long hair. He had his top off, hairy chest. He had a whiskey, Scotch whiskey, or bourbon whiskey, I should say, not Scotch, bourbon whiskey there. And his dog Daisy, would jump up, right? And I just really hit it off with Steve. I was like, this guy's something out of the movies, and we'd end up talking. I'm going, what am I paying just to have a chat with my mate, But then, when it came to fixing this machine, he was a guru. So he would, I'd message him if I hadn't, he helped me get it back up to life. And if I had an issue, he'd say, okay, I'm not going to do this accent. Position the laptop, in front of the screen. And he positioned it in front of the screen, and he'd say, go behind it, press here, almost like that. And the machine would just come to life, And that was just, it was such a magic experience for me, because I was going, this guy must know. He must have worked on so many of these tape machines over the years. He was employed by MCI back in the 70s, that's his history. It was just so inspiring, and he taught me that actually you can use this stuff and get under the hood, so to speak, and get the stuff working. He taught me not to be scared, actually, of getting under the hood. So I really owe him a load in terms of where I am now, where I don't feel frightened to look at any bit of equipment I own, really. Now, I'm if something goes wrong, I'll usually have, one or two solutions that I think will get it going, and if not, I'll call some dear techs to help me out on it. So Steve got me into MCI, Steve got me into tape, and when I started recording on tape, the first time was with she's an incredible singer, a singer called Emily King, who is from New York. She was so good, and we at that time were trying to sign her to a little side label me and Kiwanuka had going. And I just recorded just a vocal and some guitar with her on tape, and that experience of playing it back was such a game changer, actually, because at that time I just assumed, drums on tape, percussion on tape, stuff with transients, stuff that you want to affect, but actually it was just the vocals and a guitar. And when I pressed play back on tape, I honestly believe it was maybe better than when I heard it in the room. I don't know if it's probably very controversial, but I just got sucked into that playback of the music caught there, and I was like, this is probably the first time that I've experienced an experience where I record something and I want to just continuously hear it back. You know, it was so all absorbing, or and I was hooked, and that was it. And after that, I started buying tape, and I realised back at the time, don't want to upset any RTM people, but tape was £150. You'd drive up to Studio Spares on the A406, and you'd get some tape, and it was just, I just kept buying tape and recording, and I really fell in love with that process. My process back then was one of discovery and, doing a lot of stuff wrong. But now I've kind of got to a stage where I've managed to refine the workflow and integrate an analog recording process into my work with current clients. And, quite big, bigger artists now are happy for me to load up a roll of tape, and labels are happy for me to buy tape, which is like, that wasn't a consideration back then. So I think it ties back into what we were saying in the beginning about this re-emergence of a desire to have your music recorded on analog. I feel like a lot of artists maybe don't know quite what it is, but it's either okay. So at the moment, when I record something on tape in one of my multi-track tape machines, I'll show you a couple of pics. It's immediate. The feeling that comes back is immediate. The response from artists is like, this is very, very different to what we've done previously. This feels interesting, and it's that sound. But actually, in terms of getting work in, I think people just thought the concept of this process is being different and being, sitting down on the floor, for example, and I just have like a little small remote that I shuttle, and I'll pick up a guitar, and not having to look at a screen and not having to loop something back, not being able to loop something back, actually, the limitation of that seemed to really, just seems to appeal to talk to a kind of more human side of the creation of music, actually. So it really lends it. So I have the machine on in the corner of my room, and more often than not, actually, on the first time when I'm meeting an artist or creating something, I won't have a laptop on. I'll close the screen, and we'll just sit down, and I'll just shuttle back and forth on a reel, and it's usually just a reel that's been going around for quite a while. I won't put a new reel on. And it just feels right. It just feels kind of organic, even before you talk about the sonic, impact of it. The actual process of creating in this very organic way, where actually you're not having to use your eyes, you're just using your ears, feels really good, actually, and different, and shouldn't, because this is the way it was for the longest time we've been recording like this, but it feels almost radical to go back to this way of creating and capturing stuff. So sometimes when I'm using tape, I will do a process like what I've done now. I'll sit down with an artist, start recording some ideas, and then I may, after, either at the end of the day, dump a load of it into Pro Tools, so I'll just, from the repro head, dump a load of the audio, and I may just start snipping little bits and going, I really like that moment, or I really found this moment really interesting, and then I'll just make very quick, rough bounces and send them back to the artist, and they feel, they might get drawn to it. Digital in that capacity is amazing. It really makes my life, it really makes a lot of stuff possible. In fact, digital is probably the reason that I can keep tape going in a weird way, because it helps artists get that. They're so used to this instant feedback, instant, just being able to hear stuff forever on their phone, or not. And I think that the combination of those two, capturing it in a really organic way and sonically feeling great on tape, and then dumping it in the digital realm through some good converters, seems to be keeping stuff moving quite quickly, actually. I try to, talking about the process of my process with tape, I try to, and too much engineers get really annoyed with me, but I try to switch it up every time. I try to do different things. So I've had one long-term engineer that I work with who has this a very elaborate kind of, I don't know what he calls it, this process that he's come up with, German guy, which involves dumping in repro and malting here and there, and you get everything. You have all your digital, and you have all your tape, and you have all your headphone mixes and everything, all in this one way. I can't be asked with that, but when he wants to do it, it works really well. It's really impressive. Sometimes I'll record a band, like Foals, for example. I'll get Foals in the room and we'll just record to tape for the whole day and then bounce down 30 minutes. This is at the slower speed. So I generally record, in fact, all the time I record at 15 IPS for what it's worth, because I like the bottom end. I'm not too fussed about the high-end detail that is lost and the twinklies up above. I just like the way that the weight that I get actually at recording at 15 IPS, particularly on some of these American machines that I use. So let's move into tape machines. So I started on MCI JH16, 16-track tape machine. So that means I can record 16 channels on 2-inch tape, 16 channels of audio. And I just felt that was the one that I told you, my first tape machine. I fell into that format of 16 channels and 2-inch tape, and I've stuck with it. I've tried to stick with it. I didn't know at the time that's actually the most desirable. People love recording it on 16 channels, 2-inch tape. Didn't know that, but that's what I've stuck in. So I've actually bought 3 16-channel 2-inch tape machines of different manufacturers. So I've got a 16-channel 2-inch MCI. I'm going to show you the pictures because you might as well use the laptop for a bit. I'll show you quickly. I just took some now. I'm getting aircon fitted in my studio, everyone. Summer's coming. Every time for about 3 or 4 days in a year, the room gets way too hot. And I had to cancel. I had a BV session, and I just gave up on it. I said, guys, we're done, and we weren't done. I knew we weren't done. It was too hot. So I had to cancel it. Let me just see if I can show you the pictures very quickly so we know. This is a relatively recent. Pete, if you're out there, you wouldn't have seen this one, but I need your help. This is an 8-track 440B Ampex 1-inch tape machine from the late 60s. And there's loads of gear, clav and bits in front of it because it hasn't been used. But the interesting story about this, or I find it interesting at least, is I'm based at a studio called Conk Studios in North London. My room's right at the top. And Conk has an incredible history of just records. It belonged to the Kinks, still belongs to the Kinks. And in the studio, in the reception area, they've got all these old photos from 1973 when it opened up. This was one of the first tape machines they used with their Neve console. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. Anyway, long story short, I ended up buying this machine, and it turns out this was the Conk machine. This is actually the same machine that was used back in the day. So it's done this weird loop and ended up back at the studio. I thought, great sounding tape machine, American, sounds very fat, has a kind of like an edgy mid-range sound, like quite a cool, just ballsy, punchy sounding machine. I really, really like it. And I also use I've got a 2-channel version of this as well, which is phenomenal. But this is playing up at the moment. I'm going to show you another one. Oh, another guy there's a guy called Malcolm Cato in Stoke Newington who does incredible records on analog. He has an old Siemens type console, and he uses this and he does heliocentrics, and he's wicked. I really like his records, and he uses this tape machine. I'll show you another one. What have we got here? Oh, there's the 2-channel version. There's that one. Here's this one. There's oh, it's not coming. Okay. Yep, here we go. It's the other laptop. That's a Scully. That's a Scully 2-channel. This belonged to Brian Eno, and he had it in, there was a student in Clapton or something like that. Anyway, that needs a bit of love, but that's a great sounding 2-track. There's the 3M. This one is I think this one's the best one. Now, Clive Cavan, who's an incredible tech, has taken the head block. I'm not going to do him right now, but that needs to go back on there. This is such a great sounding tape machine. This was used Sly Stone, just so much in America. They're American-made decks, and this is my favourite tape machine model, without a doubt, to record multi-tracks. When this wasn't working, rather than going, okay, please, someone help me get it going, I just bought another tape machine. So this is what I use now on the daily, and this was the first people I called to bring this upstairs couldn't carry it because it was too heavy, and they just said, look, we almost killed ourselves, but we have a Bulgarian or Hungarian guy who could probably do it, and he came and he walked in, like, and had like straps around him, and he brought another guy, and as they were coming up the stairs, you were hearing them scream and all sorts of stuff. it was brutal. And bless Linda, the tech, she was hearing all this stuff and thinking, my God. Anyway, this is an Ampex MM1200 tape machine. Now, it came with a 24-channel head stack, and I changed it to a 16-channel head stack, which cost almost as much as the tape machine, actually. So the machine itself wasn't cheap, but then the head stack cost me about $3,500 just for the heads to put on, to put on the 16. And it wasn't even that 24-track didn't sound great. It was just that I wanted compatibility between my multi-tracks, to put the tape. This sounds great. I love this. This is kind of my kind of baby at the moment, but I want the 3M going. Anyway, that's some of the tape machines. I have maybe 12 or 13 tape decks at the moment. For 6 2-tracks, 4 multi-tracks, and then some other like Revoxes and some smaller kind of stuff. So I love tape. I love tape, and maybe just more to talk more about what the kind of feeling I get from it when I record to tape. I will play a few bits. I don't know how we're doing for time, but when I record to tape, I was thinking about it on the way in. Where I've ended up is when I record stuff on tape, I have a feeling that I'm going to keep it. When I record stuff in the digital world without tape, I couldn't say if it's even 50-50. And we're talking about studio. I've got high-end Prism converters, and I record at 96, and sometimes Christoph will record at 192, believe it or not. And I just don't, I almost know that I'm not going to keep it when I record digitally. But when I go to tape first, there's a good chance that even a mistake or anything I record will end up making it onto the final record. And I guess that could be dissected in a number of different ways, I'm not sure what the most important reason behind that is, but when I listen back to stuff on tape, I feel like I can kind of climb into the music. So there's like a depth. There's a size, which is partly to do with the scientific, the head bump on the tape machine and, all that kind of the sonic stuff. But there is this depth that goes back. And my kind of rookie feeling is that, even at a really high sample rate, and this is not an analog-digital debate because I'm supposed to talk about how tape and digital work together, but when I record on digital, I have a feeling that these super snapshots of recording are missing detail in those little, even at that really high sample rate. I'm sure someone else will have a really better argument to argue against that, but that might be my reason why it is. But when I record an analog, I feel like I can get inside the recordings. The size is there. It's a very forgiving medium. I can record stuff loud, and usually something comes back, and I'm kind of into it, even if it's not right. You try that on digital, and you won't be listening back for very long. Your ears won't, Artists, musicians love the idea that they're involved with a process that maybe draws them closer to their heroes. A lot of the references that people come to me with are actually quite similar. D'Angelo, Marvin Gaye, Stevie, a lot of soul references, or old reggae references, or Afrobeat. And the commonality between those references is that they all recorded on old tape machines and analog desks and stuff like that. That equipment was part of it. Obviously, talent is way more important, but that part played a part, and I think they see that I have that stuff and some of the music side, and they go, okay, cool, this is what we want to make something substantial, we want to make something that feels, like it has something timeless about it or whatever, and they come and use those references, and, more often than not, we get to a place that I feel like I'd love to listen back to this in X amount of years or whatever, Yeah, I might think, is there any, okay, so fortunately, the new Little Simz records has just come out, which is doing really well, which I'm happy about, which is nice. And I produced and wrote on that record and played most of the instruments on it as well, and used tape on a ton of it. And that's just amazing. An artist, a great artist who's, really revered, and, she's up for that. And it's given me loads of confidence to go, actually, with anyone I'm working with, be it, I don't know, a modern rapper or whatever it is, a rock band or whatever, I'll always record on my stuff to tape first for the feeling, Might be a good time to play some bits, stuff, I'm not gonna, I can go in on more kind of technical stuff, but I didn't really want to talk about the technical side of it, actually. I just want to maybe play a few things that I like that were recorded on tape that have colour and vibe and personality that you can kind of hear our tape. In fact, that's what I'll do. And then I'll maybe open the room just before we finish to any kind of questions, if anything. Anyone wants to ask anything specific, that feels good. So just on the Simz, I'm not going to play whole records. I'll just play little bits that feel good, if that's okay with you. This is a really wacky record. Loads of bottom end. Too much bottom end. Is that level okay? Feels alright. Loads of bottom ends. Wow. So you can hear all of that low 180, 200, all that weight on the kick.
She bad in that stiletto. I heard she from the ghetto. Ain't nothing like your average. She on a different level. You think you're who he feeling? Ha 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 ha, I'm screaming. Don't interrupt my song. Okay, bitch, carry on. I thought the world of you. You thought the worst of me. I'm rolled from head to toe. My steez is rock and roll. You see my London girls do it like so. Waste my time's a big no-no. If you ain't gonna move, you should probably go. Don't make me pull the plug. 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 I've almost had enough. Don't make me pull the plug. Don't make me pull the plug. Don't make me pull the plug. My time is of importance. Her ego on enormous. Like you didn't know I is that girl. I am an electric black girl. I'm not the one to.
So yeah, loads of like vibe and drum, weight and bass, personality and wacky, and one live pass all the way through. I'll play. Oh, hello. I'll play some. This is another. I'm not sure if these are the final mixes, but interesting.
I think that love is forgiving yourself. I think that love is offering your immediate help. I think that love is everything that we need in this world. I think the key is being honest and being yourself. I think love is understanding that people can change and loving them anyway through every stage. I read all about love, then I gave it to Jade. Love is sharing knowledge, there's so much to gain. Love is every time I put pen to the page. If I don't love what I'm doing, then I'm hardly engaged, yeah. God, you love me though I am flawed. I know I'm not an innocent child, but I am yours. And if you're with me, you are safe. I know my body isn't immortal, but I am brave. I think you know it's real love when it's sincere. I'ma show them I ain't scared, eradicate fear, yeah.
It's a nice
Said that we will never ever crash, phone under pressure. Love guitar.
So process, I've done a song exploder kind of podcast thing about this song, but the process of this one was so tape. It was basically me and my friend Al up in the room. That process of just loading some tape up, getting the stuff on the desk, on the MCI in this case, just hitting record and just playing one pass all the way through. Tape works really well with musicians who know what they want, and also works really well. You can, I find when I record on tape, actually, I end up keeping whole performances way more than when I record digital. When I recorded digital, I find myself chopping and doing more stuff in that way. That's similar to Simz. I'll play two more things, and then maybe, how are we doing for time? Open 5? Okay, cool, we're good. All right. And then I'll open up just any questions that maybe people might want to have. There's loads of Yussef, but actually, I'd like to try something a bit more obscure if I can get it. This is a Lithuanian artist, incredible Lithuanian artist called Monika Liu, who I made 2020 this EP with. It's wacky and it's fun, and it's tape. This was made down in Eastbourne at Echo Zoo Studios on that same MCI tape machine, and it's just fun, just weird. I'll play a little bit. It's just odd, but you can hear the colour in it. love it, but you can just, I think, yeah, I love the idea that you can record something on tape and it just kind of has a vibe, has a personality. This is before we've even talked about tape formulations and how hot I record into tape or don't, how hot I record, you know. To touch a little bit on that, I usually set up my machines up with 911 tape +6, quite a very standard setup, and I don't record in super hot because I feel that, particularly with bass and things like kick drum, I lose a lot of the transient. The more I go into it, the more it turns into mush. It's quite a common thing. They knew back in the day, they actually had Dolby units and stuff where they could record actually at very conservative levels, keep that transient, keep some of that detail, but not have such a high noise floor. But I don't use Dolby, so I just try. My records end up sounding quite hissy, but I kind of like it, you know.